I woke up to a strange feeling of disorientation, like I had just stepped out of a dream that didn't quite make sense. The dim light of early morning filtered through the curtains, and there was an unfamiliar sound that made my heart race. My nephew, Alex, had been staying with us for a few weeks, but I didn't expect the situation to escalate the way it did. What had he tried to do when I fell asleep? Why had I allowed him to get so close? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. What happens when trust breaks in ways you can't explain? When someone you love crosses a line you didn't even know existed? My name is Clara, and I'm a 38-year-old single mom of 2 boys, Ethan and Leo, aged 10 and 7. Life hasn't been easy since my divorce, but we've managed to create a routine that feels like stability, a calm after the storm. It was during one of these quieter moments in life that my sister, Diane, reached out to me. Diane was desperate. Her 19-year-old son, Alex, had been having a rough time adjusting to college. He was brilliant but withdrawn, and his recent troubles, failing grades, erratic behavior, and the emotional fallout of a bad breakup, had left her overwhelmed. She asked if he could stay with us for a while to reset, away from the pressures of home. How could I say no? Diane had been my rock when I needed her most, and Alex had always been like a third son to me. When Alex arrived, it was clear he was a shadow of the confident teenager I remembered. His eyes, once bright with mischief, were now darkened by something I couldn't quite place, sadness, perhaps, or anger. He carried himself with a mix of defiance and vulnerability, like someone who wanted help but didn't know how to ask for it. Our house, a modest but cozy 2-story home on the edge of town, quickly adjusted to accommodate Alex. His makeshift bedroom in the converted den was simple but welcoming. A twin bed with fresh linens, a small desk for his laptop, and a window that overlooked our garden. I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders as he settled in, though he rarely spoke about what was bothering him. At first, Alex seemed to blend seamlessly into our routines. He helped Ethan with his math homework, played video games with Leo, and even volunteered to cook dinner a few times. A surprising gesture, given his usual reluctance to engage. I noticed how he lingered in the kitchen after the boys had gone to bed, sipping tea and staring out the window as though searching for answers in the darkness. I didn't push him to talk. I thought time would do the healing. But beneath the surface of our peaceful coexistence, there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. It was in the way he looked at me sometimes, intensely, like he was trying to decipher a secret I wasn't aware I was keeping. At first, I dismissed it as the awkwardness of a young man trying to find his footing in a house full of children. But then there was that night, when everything changed. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the slow drip of a leaky faucet. Alex's behavior became harder to pin down. He seemed restless, wandering the house late at night, his footsteps barely muffled by the carpeted floors. I'd catch glimpses of him sitting on the couch, staring at the TV without turning it on, or pacing the kitchen with an untouched cup of tea in hand. Something was eating at him, but whenever I asked, he'd just smile faintly and say, "I'm fine, Aunt Clara." But I knew better. One evening, after the boys were asleep, I found Alex in the kitchen. He was leaning against the counter, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. The dim glow of the under-cabinet lights highlighted the tension in his posture. "You're up late," I said, pulling a glass from the cabinet and filling it with water. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, couldn't sleep. Anything on your mind?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He hesitated, his fingers drumming against his arm. "Just stuff," I sighed, leaning against the opposite counter. "Alex, I know things have been hard for you lately. You don't have to handle it all alone. If you want to talk, I'm here." For a moment, I thought he might open up. His lips parted as if to speak, but then he closed them, shaking his head. "It's nothing. Really." "Okay," I said gently, not wanting to push him. "But the offer stands." He nodded, his eyes dropping to the floor. "Thanks." I left the kitchen, but his behavior lingered in my mind. Something about the way he avoided my gaze felt off. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, more complicated. Over the next few days, the tension between us seemed to grow, though I couldn't pinpoint why. Alex became more withdrawn, but his eyes followed me whenever I entered the room. It wasn't overt, but I felt it a weight, a question he wasn't asking aloud. Then came the night that changed everything. I had fallen asleep on the couch after a particularly exhausting day. The boys had been unusually rambunctious, and by the time I tucked them in, I was too drained to make it upstairs. I must have been dreaming because I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps and the faint scent of Alex's cologne. I opened my eyes slowly, disoriented, and saw Alex standing a few feet away. His face was etched with an expression I couldn't read. Part concern, part something else. "Alex," I mumbled, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. "What's going on?" He hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I wanted to check on you. You seemed really tired earlier." His voice was soft, almost tentative, and it sent a ripple of unease through me. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long day." He didn't move. Instead, he looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You do so much for everyone, Aunt Clara. For Ethan, for Leo, even for me. I don't know how you do it." I laughed nervously, trying to defuse the moment. "It's just part of being a mom, I guess." But Alex didn't laugh. He stepped closer, his expression conflicted. "You're more than that. You're incredible." I froze, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "Alex, what are you?" "I know I shouldn't feel this way," he interrupted, his voice cracking. "But I can't help it. You're the only person who's ever made me feel safe, like I matter." "And I—" "Stop," I said sharply, my heart pounding. "This is not okay." His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the scared, broken boy he'd been when he arrived. "I'm sorry," he whispered, backing away. "I didn't mean to." "Alex," I said, my voice softer now, though my chest felt tight. "You're going through a lot right now, and I get that. But this can't happen. Do you understand?" He nodded quickly, his eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry," he repeated, his voice barely audible. "I'll go." And just like that, he turned and left, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I sat there for a long time, my mind racing. How had things come to this? Had I missed the signs? Was this my fault? A wave of guilt and confusion washed over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just shifted irreversibly. The following morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, still replaying Alex's words in my head. I couldn't make sense of what had happened. Was it just a fleeting moment of confusion for him, a result of his emotional turmoil? Or had I, unknowingly, encouraged something I shouldn't have? These questions gnawed at me as I prepared breakfast, trying to act as if everything was normal for Ethan and Leo. Alex avoided me that morning. He didn't come down for breakfast, and when I knocked on the door to the den, he mumbled something about not being hungry. I didn't press him. I needed space as much as he did to figure out how to navigate this new reality. But by the afternoon, the tension became unbearable. I decided to confront him. It was better to address this head-on than let it fester in silence. I found him in the garden, sitting on the wooden bench under the old oak tree. His shoulders were hunched, his head bowed, and he looked so small, so unlike the confident boy I remembered. "Alex," I said softly, approaching him. He looked up, startled, and immediately averted his gaze. "I know what you're going to say," he murmured. I sat down beside him, leaving enough space between us to make it clear this was a serious conversation. "Do you?" I asked, folding my hands in my lap. He hesitated, then nodded. "I crossed a line. I shouldn't have said those things last night. I don't know what's wrong with me." I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "Alex, you're not broken. You're just lost right now. You've been through a lot, and sometimes, when we're vulnerable, our emotions get tangled up. But what happened last night, it can't happen again. Do you understand?" He nodded again, his eyes brimming with tears. "I do. I swear I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You've been so kind to me, and I think I confused gratitude with something else." I felt a pang of relief at his words. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an acknowledgement, a step toward understanding. "Alex, your family. I care about you deeply, and I want to help you through this. But we need boundaries, okay? For both of us." He wiped his eyes, nodding furiously. "I get it. I do. I'm sorry, Aunt Clara. I don't know why I said those things. I think I think I've been so lonely, and you're the only person who's made me feel like I'm not a burden." His confession hit me like a punch to the gut. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the depth of his isolation, his desperation to feel seen? "You're not a burden," I said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've never been a burden. But you can't bottle up everything you're feeling. You need to talk to someone who can help you work through this." He looked at me, his expression hesitant. "Do you mean therapy?" "Yes," I said, my voice gentle but resolute. "There's no shame in asking for help, Alex. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to face what you're going through." He didn't respond immediately, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Finally, he nodded, a small but significant gesture. "Okay, I'll try." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't an easy fix, and it wouldn't be a straight path forward, but it was a start. As we sat there in the garden, the winter sun casting long shadows across the ground, I realized how fragile the bonds of family could be, and how resilient they were too. Alex's truth had come to light, and though it was painful, it also opened the door for healing. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward together, but with the boundaries we both needed. In the days that followed, life in the house found a tentative rhythm again. Alex kept to himself more than usual, but the heaviness that had hung over us seemed to lift ever so slightly. True to his word, he agreed to start therapy. Diane and I worked together to find someone local, a professional who specialized in young adults navigating emotional crises. The first session was nerve-wracking for him, and when he came home afterward, he didn't say much. But I could tell it had stirred something in him, a realization that he didn't have to carry his pain alone. For me, the experience left a mark I couldn't ignore. I'd always prided myself on being a caretaker, someone who could handle anything thrown my way. But this situation had shaken me to my core, forcing me to confront my own limits and vulnerabilities. Was I too trusting, too blind to the signs of Alex's struggles? Or had I simply been caught in the crosshairs of his confusion and need for connection? One evening, as I tucked Ethan and Leo into bed, I lingered for a moment longer than usual. Watching their peaceful faces, I was reminded of the delicate balance of family, how love, even in its purest forms, could sometimes get tangled in ways that were hard to untangle. Downstairs, Alex was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching in a notebook. It was something he'd started doing recently, a quiet outlet for the emotions he couldn't yet articulate. I didn't disturb him, but I felt a pang of something close to pride. He was trying. We both were. As I turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to my room, I thought about the fine line between love and boundaries, between compassion and self-preservation. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to hold a mirror up to ourselves and confront the parts we'd rather not see. The doubts, the fears, the cracks in our carefully constructed lives. But maybe that's where growth begins, in the messy, uncomfortable spaces where clarity feels out of reach. Alex and I had faced something neither of us could have anticipated, and while it left scars, it also gave us the chance to heal. I don't have all the answers. Maybe I never will. But I know this. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about finding a way forward one step at a time.